Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to the BrianBeatty Real Estate Show Halloween edition. So today we're going to talk about horror stories in real estate, things that go wrong throughout the course of a transaction, what you can do to avoid some of these things, and share just a lot of interesting experiences along the way. You know, as a real estate agent, you walk into people's homes on a daily basis, and sometimes you get surprised. Even now, I can still be surprised after 15 years in this business and over 1,000 transactions, over $500 million in real estate sold, and you just never know what you're going to walk into sometimes. And so I'm going to share some of these stories with you. Share some things that you guys need to know, things you need to avoid. And these are kind of the worst of the worst, quite frankly. But let's be honest. Real estate is a challenging process in and of itself because there's a lot of emotion involved, right? You've got a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts. It's an emotional process for people. And very rarely do things go perfectly according to plan. When they do, it's amazing, it's awesome, it's fantastic. But let's be real. Real estate it can be a tricky process. And so the agents that are truly experienced are the ones that can navigate you through that process, problem solve along the way based on prior experience, and have you come out of the other side of it being the winning party in the transaction. That's really the goal here, is to help you become more informed through this radio show, and then to know the questions to ask when you hire an agent, know what the process looks like, have realistic expectations about the market so that you can win in your transaction. And so the first thing I want to talk about is a scam that's costing people over $1 billion a year. And this is wire fraud, mortgage wire fraud. So it's a scam in which a hacker poses as your real estate agent and then convinces you to divert your closing costs to a fraudulent account. So mortgage wire fraud essentially relies on a complicated hacking technique called phishing. And in a phishing scam, a hacker uses a fake email or fake phone number or fake website or whatever to impersonate somebody that you trust. So a scammer who runs a mortgage wire fraud kind of business might use an email address or a phone number that looks like one your real estate agent or lender uses, or even closing attorney. And so these emails and the texts, they can look authentic. I mean, they really do look real, and they can even contain some personal information that only somebody you know would have. And so, of course, this scammer, fishes your personal information out of your agent's inbox beforehand. And so scammers, they can also use a technique called spoofing to make themselves more legitimate, where spoofing is essentially when a scammer uses a special software to mimic your agent or lender's phone number or email address. So when a scammer calls you or emails you from a spoofed account, it can look exactly like someone that you've already been talking to. So obviously the goal of a mortgage wire fraud company is to get your closing costs into an account that the scammer owns. So the scammer might tell you that, hey, there was a last minute change in their banking procedures, and hey, something might have went wrong. Hey, that email that you received with wiring instructions was actually incorrect. Use this one. And the truth, of course, is that the address the scammer gives you is their own. It's going to go straight into their pocket, right? And so once you initiate that wire transfer, it's really, really hard for you to get your money back. In most instances, you do not get your money back. So, I mean, this can leave you thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in debt, delay your closing, maybe even prevent you from buying a house. And it's easy to assume that you'll never fall for a scam, but unfortunately, this stuff is on the rise. Between 2015 and 2017, it rose over 1,100%, and starting in 2017, it started accounting for over $1 billion a year in losses in the form of real estate transaction costs that went to scammers. So how does this work? And so, Ben, let's just kind of go through kind of the common practice here. So let's say you're buying a house and you're finally ready to close. And so you finalize all your closing details, you know exactly how much you owe at closing. And then suddenly you get an email from what would either be your real estate agent or maybe the lender or the closing attorney. It has their signature. It has their address on it. They address you by name. And they essentially tell you that, hey, there's an error in your closing and that you're no longer bringing a check to closing. You have to wire your money or that the wiring instructions they previously sent were just incorrect, and they urge you to do this really quickly to avoid delays in your closing. They say, hey, and they'll use some scare tactics like, hey, if you don't do this right now, there's a chance that this loan won't fund and that your contract will be in default and that you could lose your earnest money and ultimately the house. So they scare you into a panic so that you immediately send over the money. And it's obviously a few days before closing in most instances. Sometimes we have closings where, look, things do happen last minute. Closing attorneys are incredibly busy. Lenders are busy. Appraisers are busy. The whole process is just jammed up right now. Underwriters are overworked and underpaid. A lot going on in the real estate world right now as it relates to just transactions and delays in transactions. And so it's, in this scenario, it's a pretty common method of operation for these scammers involved in mortgage wire fraud. They email you from an address that seems legitimate. Their email seems to be convincing. They may even put in like the agent's picture and their contact information that they take from the agent's email address. It's bad. And a lot of people fall for it. Like I said, over $1 billion a year over the past 3 years, past 4 actually, have been lost to mortgage wire fraud. So first step here, and here are the things that you need to know. First of all, you need to know the closing process. You need to be in direct communication over the phone with your real estate agent, with the lender, with the closing attorney. Never assume anything when it comes to sending somebody money, whether it's a real estate transaction or anything else. Have correct contact information. Be aware of last-minute closing changes by asking those questions. Hey, is this true? Call to confirm wiring instructions. That's incredibly important. And just, obviously best practice here is just never email your financial information, because if somebody gets into your account and they find that information, social security numbers, credit card information, banking information, it can be bad news for you. So that's the first one that I wanted to start off with is, this wire fraud scam. In fact, there's an addendum that we have in our contracts now that requires your real estate agent to explain to you what wire fraud is, and to be really involved with you, of course, at the tail end of the transaction when it comes time for you to send money when you're buying a house, so that this doesn't happen to you. So obviously, if it does happen, you need to contact your bank or your wire transfer company immediately, and then you can file a complaint with the FBI. You can get them involved. But first one here is just don't fall for wire fraud. Be aware of the scam. That's the first step. And then verify. Only talk to the people that are involved in the transaction. If you're talking to somebody a few days before closing that you've never talked to before, you need to talk to the person that you've been in contact with, the closing attorney. Call their office, call that closing attorney's cell number, call your agent, and just make sure that everything is on the up and up.